Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I am your host, and today we have a really fascinating stack of research on the table for you.
I'm a resident clinical expert, and yeah, I'm so excited to dig into this one. It's a pretty intense topic.
It really is. I mean, when I first looked at the outline, I expected something cosmetic. I'm talking about dentures, right?
Right, that's the common perception.
But the more I read through the sources you brought, the less it felt like a medical brief. The more it read like, I don't know, a disaster report from a structural engineering firm.
It totally reads that way. It's a complete shift in reality for the human skull.
Yeah.
We tend to think of dentistry as biology, bacteria, gum health, fixing cavities.
Yeah, exactly.
But the sources we are covering today, they focus entirely on the edentulous state. That's the clinical term for having no teeth.
Right.
And the big takeaway here isn't about how to brush or what shade of white to pick for a patient. It's about what happens when you remove a highly sophisticated, high-tech suspension system.
And try to replace it with a block of plastic.
Exactly. A block of plastic sitting on a foundation that is actively trying to disappear.
That was the hook that grabbed me immediately. The idea that we aren't just talking about missing teeth. We are talking about a biomechanical crisis.
It really is a crisis for the body.
The documents describe it as this radical engineering overhaul. The body loses its natural shock absorbers, and we basically have to use physics to stop the whole thing from collapsing.
That is the core problem we're unpacking today. The mission of this deep dive is to look at exactly how the mouth handles force in this vacuum.
Right, because the force doesn't just go away.
No, you still have to chew food. So we need to understand why shaving bone, or what the literature calls resorption, is this silent enemy that never sleeps.
And we also need to look at the absolute gymnastics required to make a denture actually function.
Because, as the text points out repeatedly, we are moving from a tooth-supported system to a mucosa-supported system.
And, to the layperson, or even some clinicians early in their career, that distinction tooth-supported versus mucosa-supported, it might sound like a minor technicality.
Oh, but it's not.
You're saying this is a total game changer for the patient.
It is a change in the laws of physics for that patient.
Wow.
Imagine you are driving a high-performance sports car on a paved track.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You have high-end shocks, sticky tires. You can feel every turn. That is the dentulous state, having natural teeth.
Right.
Moving to a mucosa-supported system, wearing dentures, is like taking the wheels off that car, putting it on wooden sled runners, and trying to drag it over a rocky field.
Wow. That paints a vivid and honestly kind of painful picture. We're asking soft tissue, which is basically just skin, to do the heavy lifting that specialized bone and ligaments used to do.
And the skin is simply not designed for it. That's the core tension of this entire discussion. We are asking the body to do something it absolutely hates.
So let's start with what we're actually losing. Section 1 of our breakdown is the suspension system versus the landing pad. When I have my natural teeth and I bite into a steak or a really crisp apple, what is actually happening biomechanically? Because the notes keep mentioning this periodontal ligament, or PDL.
The PDL is the unsung hero of the human skull. Under the gum line, your tooth isn't just fused to the bone like a nail hammered into a wooden board.
Because if it were, it would break.
It would likely shatter under the impact of chewing. The forces are huge. Instead, the tooth is suspended in the socket by the periodontal ligament.
So it's like a hammock.
Think of it as a high-tech hydraulic hammock. It's a complex network of thousands of tiny fibers connecting the tooth root to the bone.
Okay.
And it does three critical things. First, it acts as a shock absorber. When you bite, the tooth physically sinks into the socket and the PDL stretches to dissipate that energy.
So it protects the skull from the impact.
Yeah.
It's the suspension system on that sports car you mentioned earlier.
Precisely. It dampens the blow. Second, it provides proprioception. This is a huge factor we'll come back to.
Proprioception meaning feeling where your body is in space.
Yes. The PDL is loaded with mechanoreceptors. It gives your brain precise instant feedback. It tells you, I am biting on something hard, or I'm biting on the left side, or my jaw is closed.
It's your targeting computer.
Exactly. It's your targeting computer.
That explains why when a tiny hair gets in your food, you feel it instantly. You know exactly where it is.
Right. That's the PDL at work. It's incredibly sensitive. And the third function is force distribution. This is the structural engineering part.
Oh, so?
The PDL distributes force axially, meaning along the long axis of the tooth root.
So straight down.
Straight down. It takes a massive chaotic chewing force and funnels it straight down the root into the bone. And the bone loves this.
The bone likes the pressure.
It perceives this tension, the pulling from the ligament fibers, as a signal to stay strong. It's like exercise for the bone.
Use it or lose it.
Exactly. And there's a specific number in the data regarding this movement, the physiologic mobility of a natural tooth.
Yes, I highlighted this because it blew my mind. Natural teeth aren't rigid at all.
No, they move. We don't feel it. But they displace vertically about 25 to 100 microns.
And a micron is a millionth of a meter. So 100 microns is roughly, what, the thickness of a sheet of paper?
Just about. It's microscopic, but it's just enough give to safely dampen the load.
Okay, so 25 to 100 microns. Everyone listening needs to keep that number in mind, because now we enter the edentulous state.
The teeth are extracted.
The PDL is in the biohazard bin. The shock absorbers are completely gone. What happens to the physics now?
Chaos. Absolute chaos. The suspension system vanishes. Now, when you chew, those forces aren't being funneled down a root anymore.
Right.
They're being smashed directly onto the landing pad. The residual ridge mucosa, the submucosa, and the bone underneath.
You're pressing a hard piece of acrylic plastic directly onto soft gum tissue.
And gum tissue is largely water and collagen. It squishes. It displaces under pressure.
The contrast in the data is shocking here. We said natural teeth move up to 100 microns. How much does a complete denture move under load?
A complete denture moves anywhere from 1 to 3 millimeters.
Millimeters.
Millimeters. If you do the math, that is a 10 to 20 times increase in displacement compared to natural teeth.
That is staggering. I'm trying to visualize that in everyday terms. Imagine if the floor of your kitchen moved 20 times more than it was supposed to every time you took a step.
You'd never be able to walk comfortably. You'd be exhausted.
You'd be constantly bracing yourself just to stay upright. And that is the instability denture wearers live with every day.
They are trying to perform a high-force activity chewing food on a platform that is sliding around, sinking, and rebounding 1 to 3 millimeters with every single bite.
It's like trying to hammer a nail while standing on a waterbed.
That's a great way to put it. And because that targeting computer, the PDL, is gone, they don't even really know where the waterbed is.
Precisely. They are flying blind on a moving platform, which leads us to the geography of the problem.
The anatomy.
Right, because looking at the notes, it seems like not all jaws are created equal. We have this tale of two ridges here. The upper jaw and the lower jaw behave very differently when the teeth come out.
They do. It is an incredibly unfair fight. We have the maxilla, which is the upper jaw, and the mandible, the lower jaw.
Let's start with the maxilla. The notes describe this as the stable partner. Why does the upper jaw get off so easy?
It all comes down to surface area and geometry. The maxilla has the palate, the roof of the mouth. That is a broad, continuous span of bone that connects the two sides of the arch.
So when you put a denture up there, it's not just sitting on a narrow ridge.
Right. You have this massive snowshoe effect.
Snowshoes. I like that analogy. You're spreading the weight over a huge area so you don't sink into the snow.
Exactly. The horizontal hard palate provides a fantastic base for support. Plus, the mucosa up there tends to be heavily keratinized.
Keratinized meaning tougher.
Yes, it's tougher tissue, more like the skin on your palms than the delicate skin on your inner arm. But there's another major factor working in the maxilla's favor.
The resorption pattern.
Yes, resorption meaning how the bone shrinks after the teeth are gone. In the upper jaw, the bone resorbs centripetally.
Centripetally. That means it shrinks inward and upward.
Imagine a circle getting smaller. While the arch gets smaller over time, it generally retains a shape that can grip the denture reasonably well. The surface area stays somewhat cohesive.
Okay, so the upper jaw is the snowshoe. It shrinks, but it stays stable. Now we get to the mandible, the lower jaw.
The nightmare scenario.
Literally what the source material calls it.
Yeah.
The nightmare scenario biomechanically. Why is the lower jaw so much worse?
The mandible is a structural disaster for stability. First, look at the shape. It's a horseshoe. You don't have that big palate across the middle connecting the sides to spread the load.
It's just an open horseshoe. And what's in the middle of that horseshoe?
A giant, incredibly strong muscle called the tongue.
Right.
Which is actively flailing around all day long, speaking, swallowing, trying to dislodge everything you put in there.
So you have significantly less surface area to start with, and a very active tenant inside who is constantly trying to kick you out.
Correct. And the mucosa on the lower ridge is often less keratinized. It's thinner, so it's much more sensitive to pain under pressure.
But the real killer, going back to what we just talked about, is the resorption pattern, right?
Yes. In the mandible, it's not centripetal, it's centrifugal. It resorbs downward and outward.
Wait, let me picture this. So the upper jaw shrinks in, and the lower jaw melts out.
Exactly. So over a period of years, the physical relationship between the top and bottom jaw changes completely. The top gets narrower, the bottom gets wider relative to the ridge crest.
It's called crossbite evolution in the notes.
Right. It makes it incredibly hard to get the plastic teeth to meet correctly because the structural foundations are literally moving in opposite directions.
It sounds totally impossible.
Mhm.
But the notes do mention one hero for the lower jaw, the buccal shelf. What is that, and why does it save the day?
Ah, yes. The buccal shelf is the one saving grace of the mandible. It's an area of dense cortical bone on the outer side of the ridge, near the back by the cheeks.
Cortical bone, meaning hard, dense bone, unlike the spongy stuff.
Yes, highly structurally sound bone. See, the crest of the ridge, the very top part where the natural teeth used to be, is actually very weak in the mandible.
It is. You'd think that's where you'd want the denture to sit.
You would think so, but no. It's often spongy or it heals into sharp, specky ridges. If you press a hard plastic denture right on top of it, it hurts terribly, and the bone just melts away from the pressure.
So we have to engineer the denture to basically bypass the crest.
Exactly. We designed the base to put the primary weight on the buccal shelf instead.
So you're essentially shifting the chewing force off the top of the ridge and onto this sturdy shelf on the outside.
Yes. It's the primary stress-bearing area. If a clinician misses the buccal shelf when making the denture impression, the patient will be in agony and their bone loss will accelerate dramatically.
Because it's the only part of the anatomy tough enough to actually take the hit.
Precisely.
So, just to recap this unfair fight for you listening, the mandible has less support, more movement, a tongue fighting it constantly, opposing resorption patterns to the upper jaw, and only one small shelf of good bone to hold on to.
And that is exactly why patients usually love their upper denture and absolutely hate their lower denture. Physics is simply stacked against the lower jaw.
Which brings us to the consequences of all this force. We've talked about displacement and anatomy, but now we really need to talk about destruction. Section 3 of our deep dive, the physics of destruction.
This is where the conversation gets very serious. We aren't just managing a patient's comfort. We are managing the long-term structural integrity of their jaw.
We deal with 3 types of forces here: vertical, horizontal, and oblique.
Yeah.
The notes seem to suggest that human bone reacts very differently to each of these forces.
It does. Bone is a living, dynamic tissue, and it is very, very picky about how it likes to be touched.
So vertical force is basically biting straight down. Is this good or bad?
Ideally, it's okay. Vertical compressive forces are generally tolerated quite well by bone.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, intermittent compressive force can actually stimulate bone maintenance. Think of it like walking or running. The vertical impact keeps your leg bones dense and strong.
So if the denture pushes straight down evenly, the bone says, okay, I'm needed here, and it stays denser.
Exactly. But we don't just bite straight down like a nutcracker.
Right, we chew, we grind our food, we slide our jaws around.
And that introduces horizontal and shear forces. These are the absolute enemies of the edentulous jaw.
Why does bone hate shear force so much? What makes it so destructive compared to vertical force?
It's a vascular issue and a structural one. Shear force, think of rubbing sandpaper sideways across a piece of wood. It tears at the soft tissues.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It is. It physically cuts off the blood supply to the periosteum, which is the skin covering the bone. Without a healthy blood supply, the bone underneath dies and resorbs.
And structurally?
Structurally, the tiny, bony struts inside the jaw simply aren't built to take heavy side loading. They snap and dissolve.
So vertical force is like exercise, but horizontal force is sheer trauma.
Yes. And oblique force is just a nasty combination of both. It's the worst of both worlds because it combines heavy downward pressure with a sliding, tearing action.
This brings us to that term that kept popping up in the reading, the big, scary acronym, RRR, residual ridge resorption.
RRR. It sounds clinical, but it's actually quite tragic for the patient. It is chronic, progressive, irreversible bone loss.
Irreversible is the key word there, right?
Completely. Once the teeth are extracted, the bone begins to disappear. It is most rapid in the first year. You can lose a massive amount of bone volume just in those first 12 months.
But it slows down eventually.
It slows down, but it never truly stops. It is a lifelong, relentless process of the jaw melting away.
And there's a mechanism mentioned in the research called Wolff's Law, which explains why this happens. Now, I always thought Wolff's Law meant bone gets stronger under stress, like weightlifters having denser bones.
That is the common understanding, yes. Wolff's Law states that bone remodels itself based on the loads placed upon it.
Right.
In a healthy person with natural teeth, remember the PDL, The ligament pulls on the bone-creating tension, and Wolff's Law builds stronger bone to resist that pulling.
But with the dentures,
With dentures, we aren't pulling on the bone anymore. We are pushing on it. We are compressing the blood supply. So in a denture wearer, Wolff's Law works in reverse. The pressure, especially if it's uneven or if it's that tearing shear pressure, signals the body to break the bone down.
because the body thinks, this area is under attack, let's retreat. Let's take the bone away from the trauma.
Exactly. The body's defense mechanism is to resorb the bone to get it away from the painful pressure of the plastic.
That is a cruel twist of biology. The very mechanism that maintains your skeleton normally is the same one destroying your jaw when you wear dentures.
It is deeply ironic.
Yeah.
And going back to our unfair fight between the upper and lower jaws, do you recall how much faster the mandible disappears compared to the maxilla?
I do. The reading said roughly 4 times faster.
4 times faster. So the jaw with the least amount of grip, the smallest surface area, and the tongue fighting it is also the one dissolving 4 times as quickly.
That is staggering. That is exactly why long-term denture wearers often end up with what looks like a protruding chin, right? Or what some call a witch's chin.
Yes, a class 3 profile.
It's not that the chin bone is actively growing, it's that the jawbone holding the teeth has collapsed so much that the vertical height of the lower face actually shrinks. The face literally folds in on itself.
It's a visible external sign of a massive internal engineering failure.
So we have a biomechanical nightmare on our hands.
Yeah.
No suspension system, slippery foundations, shear forces actively eating away the bone, and a lower jaw that is trying to resign from the job. How do we fix this? Section 4 of the outline is engineering the solution.
Well, we have to turn to physics. Since we can't change the biology, we can't just magically grow new bone or regrow the periodontal ligaments. We have to manipulate the mechanics.
We have to outsmart the forces.
Exactly. And the first concept we have to master is the lever.
I haven't thought about levers since high school physics class. But the notes say dentures act like class 1 and class 3 levers.
Think of a teeter-totter on a playground. That's a class 1 lever. If you bite down hard on the front teeth of a denture, what do you think the back of the denture wants to do?
He wants to lift up.
Right, because there's nothing actually holding it down in the back. It's not glued or screwed into the bone.
It just sits there, so it tips.
It tips, and that tipping action creates, you guessed it, shear force across the tissue. That dragging, tearing force we just identified as the ultimate bone killer.
So we have to design the setup to stop the teeter-totter from moving.
We have to eliminate the lever effect entirely.
And one of the main strategies listed for doing that is something called balanced occlusion. This seems to be the holy grail of denture engineering.
It is, and it is incredibly difficult to achieve perfectly. Let's look at natural teeth first. In natural teeth, when you slide your jaw to the left to chew some food, your teeth on the right side don't touch at all. They separate.
Right, the canines guide them apart. Canine guidance.
Exactly. That's healthy. That's totally normal for a dentulous patient. But with dentures, if you bite on the left side and the right side doesn't touch, the right side of the denture flips right up.
It loses its suction. It destabilizes.
It breaks the seal completely.
Like stepping on the very edge of a loose floorboard. The other end smacks you in the face.
That is a perfect analogy. So balanced occlusion means we engineer the artificial teeth so that even when you slide your jaw all the way to the left, the teeth on the right side still maintain a tiny bit of contact.
Oh, wow.
They balance the tipping force. It stops the teeter-totter effect in its tracks.
So you're intentionally making teeth touch that normally wouldn't, just to keep the plastic plate from flipping over.
Correct. We are sacrificing natural biological chewing patterns for purely mechanical stability. We have to create a tripod effect at all times, no matter where the jaw moves in space.
That must require incredible precision. Because if one tooth is even a millimeter too high, the whole system rocks.
Even less than a millimeter.
Right.
A high spot of just 100 microns can break the seal and introduce shear force.
There was another strategy mentioned in the engineering section called selective pressure. This sounds like it ties back to that buccal shelf discussion we had.
Yes, it ties in perfectly. This is about how we take the initial impression, the mold of the mouth, before we even make the denture.
Okay.
We know the crest of the ridge is structurally weak and the buccal shelf is incredibly strong. So when we take the mold, we don't just take a passive even copy of the gums.
You manipulate it.
We use a technique that intentionally places maximum pressure on the stress-bearing areas, like the buccal shelf and the hard palate.
And less pressure on the weak spots.
Exactly. We provide relief or minimal pressure on the delicate areas like the incisive papilla or sharp bony prominences.
You're essentially customizing the fit to heavily load the strong parts and float over the weak parts.
Exactly. We are trying to mechanically convert those harmful shear stresses into beneficial compressive stresses on the specific areas of bone that can actually take the hit. We are dictating to the denture exactly where to sit hard and where to hover.
That makes a lot of sense. But there's one more factor here in the notes that isn't about plastic or acrylic or bone. It's about the brain, the human factor.
This is often the hardest hurdle for the patient. We talked about the PDL providing proprioception, that sensation of, I know exactly where my teeth are.
Right, the targeting computer.
When you lose the PDL, you lose that vital feedback loop. You are flying blind. The patient literally does not know how hard they are biting or exactly where their jaw is positioned relative to the plastic teeth.
So they can't feel the bite until the gum actually hurts.
Exactly. Pain becomes their primary feedback mechanism, which is terrible.
So how do they chew? How do they ever learn to not bite their tongue or tip the denture over?
They have to develop an entirely new sensory system. They have to rely on mucosal receptors in the skin, which are vastly less sensitive, and muscle memory from the jaw muscles and the jaw joint.
They have to rewire their brain.
They do. The notes say this neuromuscular adaptation takes 4 to 8 weeks at a minimum.
8 weeks just to learn how to chew again.
Yes. It's a massive neurological rewiring. The brain has to learn to control this clumsy plastic tool using vague, muffled signals from the gum tissue rather than sharp, precise signals from the tooth roots.
It's why new denture wearers often look like they're chewing strangely or speaking a bit differently. They're trying to find their bearings. They're mapping a completely new world inside their mouth.
It's a masterclass in human adaptation, really.
So, bringing this all together for you listening, we've gone from the extreme precision of the periodontal ligament to the massive instability of a mucosa-supported system,
We've seen how the anatomy works against us.
especially in the lower jaw with that centrifugal resorption.
And we've seen that clinical success isn't just about making a denture that looks pretty when they smile.
Right. A pretty denture that functions like a Class 1 lever will destroy the patient's jawbone in a few short years.
The big takeaway for me is that as clinicians, we are fighting a losing battle against RRR, residual ridge resorption.
We are. The bone is going to melt. Biomechanics is literally the only shield we have.
If we ignore the physics, if we ignore balanced occlusion or selective pressure impressions, we aren't just making a denture that fits badly. We are actively acting as an accelerant for the destruction of the patient's jaw.
We are helping the bone melt away faster.
Precisely. We are structural engineers trying to shore up a building that is slowly sinking into the mud. We have to use every mechanical trick in the book to slow the sinking.
That is a heavy, heavy realization. It's not just a comfort issue, it's a structural preservation issue. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final provocative thought from the research that really stuck with me. It's this concept of viscoelasticity. This felt like the final variable that makes true perfection just totally impossible.
Yes. Viscoelasticity. This is the variable that keeps prosthodontists awake at night.
The notes explain that the mucosa, the gum tissue that the denture sits on, actually deforms over time. It's not a solid block of wood. It has fluid in it.
Right. It's viscoelastic, meaning if you press on it in the morning, it has a completely different shape and rebound than if you press on it in the evening after the patient has been chewing all day.
Because the fluids get pushed out of the tissue.
Yes. It changes shape under load and takes time to bounce back.
So here is the thought for everyone listening to mull over. We spend all this time trying to get a perfect fit. We use selective pressure, we balance the occlusion, we measure the bite down to the micron.
We try to.
But the foundation itself, the gums, is actively changing shape minute by minute as fluids move in and out of the tissue.
It raises a very uncomfortable question for the field. Is a perfect fit ever truly possible?
Or are we just managing a compromise that shifts every single hour of the day?
You fit the denture perfectly to the mouth at 9 a.m., but does it actually fit that same mouth at 6 p.m.?
If the ground you're building on is constantly moving, the blueprint is always just a suggestion. That is a fascinating place to stop. We hope you learned something new today about the engineering marvel and nightmare that is the edentulous human mouth.
It's certainly a reminder to appreciate your periodontal ligaments while you have them.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.